Ballad of Johnny Arcane by Jim Nail, read by Jim Nail. Chapter 3, Lucy, Part 3. On the seventh day, the rain dwindled and the ladles stopped singing. Big drops plopped from branches and the rivulets gurgled through the ferns and moss. Lucy sat on the porch staring at a patch of blue sky above the distant hills. Johnny sat beside her, took her hand, and held it there in silence for a long time. The music they made that morning was slow and mysterious, the harmonies purer, less prone to flights of ragged wildness. Fewer storms, more quiet yearnings. It was as if the strings of the fiddle and the mandolin had come into tune of their own accord, as if they had stretched and relaxed until they found a brief, common tonality. Johnny tried a few of the old songs. Woodpecker's Dilemma, Softly Breaks the Baker's Egg. Lucy followed him obediently like a schoolgirl, first tracing the melody directly, then in octaves, then in thirds and open fifths. There was great beauty and tenderness in the sound. Once he caught sight of the glint of a tear in her eye. Mid-morning, the bell rang from below. There were clients at the bathhouse. Lucy put on her customary silk robe and excused herself. She was gone for a long time, leaving Johnny alone in the cabin with a gnawing restlessness in his arms and legs and a soft ache in his heart. He went outside. Birds were singing, and there was a constant murmur of wind at the top of the trees. He walked around behind the cabin and found a village of birdhouses made of bark, overflowing with seeds. On the ground was a blue ceramic bowl full of some sort of soggy meal. Above it, on a plank of wood, words were scrawled, "For raccoons only." He went back in the cabin, found the amber bottle under the bed, poured a goodly portion into a mug and drank it down. Then he went back outside and stood on the porch. He heard sounds from the bathhouse, the hissing of steam and the roiling of the kettles. Then he heard voices. You couldn't usually hear voices from the bathhouse. Someone was shouting, then a bang, like a door slam. Then shouting again, higher pitched this time, a girl's voice. It was Lucy. She was using her other language, but it was different. It was jagged and harsh and wobbling in the high register like a chicken on a chopping block. He heard the branches on the trail snap and the plod of her feet on the steps. She burst into the clearing in front of the cabin. Her robe was untied and flying open. Her nakedness was everywhere. When she saw Johnny, she shifted languages, but she did not appear to be speaking to him. "He's not a good man. He's a bad man. He shouldn't have come." She stumbled into the cabin, her arms flailing. She grabbed the quilt from the bed and threw it on the floor. Her eyes glazed the room wildly as if she were looking for something to break. Then she saw Johnny, and she ran out and fell into his arms. "Oh, Johnny, he's a bad man. He wants to hurt me. Johnny, what am I going to do?" Johnny pulled her close and pressed her head to his chest. "Who wants to hurt you? Is it Bow Wow?" "Oh, no, 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 no." Not Bow Wow. Bow Wow would never hurt me. Bow Wow saved me." Then she just started crying, and she cried for a long time, her tears and her slobber soaking his chest. Slowly her sobs subsided into whimpers, then sniffles, and she dropped her shoulders and slumped her weight into him. He thought she was going to fall asleep, but at last she spoke. "A man came. He said he wanted a bath, but he didn't want a bath. He came for me. He came. He kept asking me questions, bad questions, the kind you shouldn't ask. I knew what he wanted. He wanted to take me back. They sent him to take me back." Johnny pulled himself away, held her at arm's length, and stared into her face. "Where? Why would they want to take you back?" She cast her eyes down. "Johnny, I'm a fugitive." He was perplexed. "I don't know the meaning of that word." "A fugitive is a person who is running away from someone who wants to hurt them. Sometimes a fugitive is running away from something they did wrong. But I didn't do anything wrong." He tried to pull her back to him, against him, but she made herself stiff and unmovable. "Lucy, who wants to hurt you?" She shook her head. "I can't tell you everything, Johnny. There are things I can't tell anybody." "Well, tell me something then. Anything. Tell me something I don't already know." They went back in the cabin. She picked up the quilt and wrapped herself in it. He kindled a fire. He made her a cup of tea, and she sat on the edge of the bed, cradling it in her hands. "The man who came for you, is he still here?" "No. Bow Wow sent him away. He used magic. He can do this thing where he erases your mind. Not forever. That would be too cruel." "Will he come back?" "I don't think so. Bow Wow's magic is very strong. But there may be others. Johnny, I'm afraid. I'm so afraid." "You could come with me. I can keep you safe. We could be sojourners together." "I don't want to be a sojourner." There was a whimper in her voice. "I want to stay here with Bow Wow. I want to stay here for the rest of my life." She started to cry. This time she let Johnny comfort her. He sat on the bed and stroked her hair. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Why is it like this?" she sighed. "Why is it like this? Why is it so beautiful? It would have been better. It would have been better if it had never been so beautiful." Bow Wow brought dinner in his usual fashion. After they ate, they lay together on the bed and finished the elixir in the amber bottle. They talked. Johnny tried many ways to get her to tell him more of her story. I didn't want to bring any of it here," she said. "I wanted to forget it all. I don't even remember what my name was in the other place. It wasn't Lucy." "Where did you get the name Lucy?" "Bow Wow gave it to me. He said it means the morning light." Johnny told her a story he learned in school. In the time of fire and bandits, the hero, Borderbinder, stole a bag of cornmeal from the bandit king Deathbridge. With minions of bandits in pursuit, he circled the 4 directions, spreading a line of cornmeal everywhere he went. When he came full circle and wound up where he started, the bandits caught him and cut off his head. But immediately the fires swelled and killed all the bandits and burned themselves out. Ever since then, the people inside the circle have been safe and happy. But they must remember to honor the four directions and practice the rituals. That story is true, she said, except for one thing. The fires didn't really burn themselves out. They just moved further away. They're still burning. There was something different in her voice when she said this. It was like she had slipped away from his grasp into somewhere he couldn't go. He reached out to touch her, but she stood abruptly, and her face changed back into that of a child. "I want to show you something," she said. "It's very beautiful." She knelt by the bed and pulled from under it a tarnished copper box with engravings on the lid. Inside were many bright, shiny things, but what she selected was a piece of parchment folded in half. "Look," she exclaimed as she unfolded it. The ply was thin and wrinkled, unlike the sturdy parchment used for messages, and it had a little shine to it like a bayberry leaf. It was a picture unlike any he had ever seen. A waterfall plunged over a jagged cliff, and mist rose from the pool below. It wasn't the subject that made it so extraordinary, it was the way it was made. Every detail was so sharply etched, yet blended together. The shadows in the cascade, the tiny young tendrils of the moss clinging to the stone. But there were no raised cakes of pigment on the surface. It was flat and glossy. He ran his fingers over it. It was like looking at the image of a waterfall in a mirror. How could this be? Lucy clapped her hands and laughed. "You like it. I knew you would like it. It was given to me when..." She caught herself and drew a quick breath. A cloud crossed her face, but then she laughed. "I think it was made by wood sprites with little tiny pots of paint. 2 or 3 of them could have fit on it at once. It probably took them days. You can have it. You can take it when you..." Her words halted momentarily, and her eyes changed color. "When you go." There was a moment of silence, then they fell into each other's arms, and a tear escaped Lucy's eyes. They spent that night wrapped together in the bed, caressing, kissing, drifting in and out of sleep. They did not repeat the ecstatic ritual of the body. Sometimes they cried together openly. Other times she buried her head in his chest and sang little songs in her other language. Mostly he wanted to memorize her, the hourglass of her waist, the pout of her lips, the wild extravagance of her hair. He followed her breathing, especially when she drifted off to sleep. He synchronized his breath with hers and found, to his surprise, he couldn't get enough air. Her bellows were so small, his so wide and thirsty. For Lucy, these 4 walls would suffice. She wanted to be protected, sheltered, enclosed, enwombed. He stroked her shoulders, and she stirred. He rested his palm on her cheek. Inwardly, he knew why he did these things, but he did not articulate it. Tonight, these 4 walls would suffice. In the morning, There was a knock on the porch. Bow Wow stood there in his melon-colored robe. "Lucy, your friend must leave now. The rain has stopped." Lucy took a short, sharp breath and stared into Johnny's face for a moment. Then it was as if something descended upon her from within. Her eyes went wild and her voice broke open into a wail. "No!" she cried. "No, no, no! You can't take him! You can't take him!" She rushed at Bow Wow and she shoved him hard on the chest, but he was like a mountain. He didn't even tilt. His face remained calm and serene. She turned to Johnny. "Johnny, don't let him take you." Johnny tried to hold her, but she pulled away. Thrashing about the room, she threw herself at the walls. A string of bells tinkled to the floor. Finally, Johnny was able to get her by the arm. He pulled her up and pressed her to his chest. "He's not trying to take me, Lucy. He's just telling me it's time to go. It's what I'm called to do. You knew this. We both knew this." He stroked her hair. She pulled against his arms, but he held tight, and finally she gave in and sank into him, weeping. "I don't want you to go, Johnny. I want you to stay here with me forever. I could take you with me. I told you that before. We could be sojourners together." No, that can't be." She pulled away and wiped her arm across her eyes. When she spoke again, it was with a tone of flat resignation. "I'll help you with your things." She turned and started gathering up Johnny's clothing and his tools and placing them in the backpack. She did not speak. She seemed to be performing a series of routine tasks. But when she picked up the mandolin, she held it for a while, stroked its neck, ran her fingers over the strings. Then she handed it to him, bowed, turned, and fell onto the bed. As he followed Bow Wow down the steps toward the bathhouse, Johnny heard her voice singing in the other language, an elegant yet mournful melody, part blessing, part lament. His heart was torn in two. He wanted to run back to the cabin and draw his entire body into his arms. Lucy, Lucy, so small. He could put her in his pocket. Oliver, no. He would come back. He would send messages. It wasn't over. At the same time, he knew he was being propelled toward a destiny that was beyond his control. He felt a great restlessness in his arms and legs. Above, small white clouds moved slowly with purpose across a clear blue sky.